Okay, well I did say I wasn't going to come out for a couple of weeks with the camera at the back end of last week, but the weather's so good today, blue sky and warm weather, I had to come out somewhere. So I popped down to Bedford Purlieus Wood between Wansford and Cliffe. It's a mighty big place. Not a huge range of orchids here and not big numbers either, but they have some rarities. So I've come today to see if I can find fly orchids and bird's nest orchids, and it's a bit early. It's about 7 to 10 days before they'd normally be in flower, but I'm hoping to just catch the odd one with a flower on. It's a bit desperate, but it's an excuse to come out really on such a nice day. So we're going to go down, take a look, and keep fingers crossed that we might find something. Okay, now the fly orchid is a mighty tough orchid to find. It's very, very small, and it grows in scrubby grassland that looks remarkably similar to the fly orchid itself. So spotting it is not easy, but I've been to this site a few times previously and I've managed to find it. It shouldn't really be in flower for best part of another 10 days, but I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that we might catch one with at least one flower on board. I'll tell you a little bit more when I find it. We're just coming up to the area now where in the past that I found the plant, so we'll take a look. Well, having virtually given up trying to find fly orchids, which are never the easiest thing to find, I have actually found one. It's only a small one, well they're all small really, but there's only a couple of flowers on it, but at least I found one, so the trip's been worthwhile. So I'll share it with you in a second once I've turned the camera around. Fly orchid's called a fly orchid because the flower is meant to mimic a fly, or more precisely a wasp. That cute little thing there is meant to look like a female digger wasp, and it's the male digger wasp that pollinates these plants, and only the male digger wasp. So it relies solely on one of these increasingly rare little wasps to land on it and do its business, and that's where the pollination takes place. Now the fly orchid is a fairly scarce orchid, and the digger wasp is a fairly scarce wasp, so it's quite a precarious existence for these plants, and it relies heavily on areas and landscapes, natural environments like this one at Bedford Purlieus, and even then they're very tough to find, but it's good to see there's a few of them still surviving in this field at these woods. That's the fly orchid for you. There you have it, a Bedford Purlieus fly orchid. Believe it or not, that flower is about the size of a small fingernail. In fact, I'm going to get my car keys out in a minute and show you just how small it really is. There you go, it's a tiny little flower, about 1 centimetre tall. Okay, so that was pretty successful. I wasn't really quite expecting to find fly orchids in bud, but there was the chance. They're about 10 days away from when they really should be coming out, and I may pop back in a couple of weeks' time and catch them with a few more flowers on the stalks, in their prime, as it were. Second target species today is the bird's nest orchid, which, if the fly orchid is rare, then this one is a lot rarer. It grows in woodland, it grows in very, very peculiar soil conditions, and it takes some finding. But I found it before in this location, so I'm going to go and take a look. We're currently in the northwest of Bedford Purlieus Wood. We're going to walk across now to the eastern side and to the perimeter path that runs up the eastern side of the woods, and that's where I've seen them before. So fingers crossed we can chalk up 2 species today. Okay, we're over on the eastern perimeter track now at Bedford Purlieus Woods. This is where I've seen bird's nest orchids before. They need very, very particular habitat to thrive, and even then you'll be lucky to see more than 2 or 3 in any one location. They need beech woods. They grow in the leaf litter of beech trees. They grow on fungi. They're in effect parasitic. They grow off living fungi, so they have to be present in the beech litter as well. They're strange looking plants, as in very strange looking plants. They have very little, if any, chloroform in them, which means there's no greenery. They look yellow, they look like they're dead basically, but hopefully I'll find one and I can show you that they're very much alive, and they are very much orchids, but they're pale yellow in colour. They're called bird's nest orchids because their roots underground are a matted jumble of very fine roots that look like a bird's nest apparently. I won't argue with that one. They can lie underground for several years before popping up, and if they do pop up they probably won't come back next year. So even though I've seen them here before, there's no real guarantee I can home in on where I've seen them previously. So it's a case of finding the right spot in the right beech woods that looks about right, and then just being lucky. So it'll be a little bit further along this path, so I'll come back to you when I get there. Well, absolutely nothing at the usual location, so I veered off into this woodland area here, which is a beech wood. There's plenty of beech litter on the floor, and guess what? Absolutely naffle. Absolutely nothing. It looks good. It's the right sort of spot, but absolutely nothing. So I'm going to go back onto the path where I've seen them before and retrace my steps and keep my fingers crossed. You never know. Well, that's a fail. I don't like failing. I was pretty confident there'd be at least one or two plants just coming through, but absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nothing in the usual spots. Nothing in the beech woods. No sign of anything emerging, and they should be emerging now, even though they shouldn't be flowering as such quite yet. So yeah, I don't like failing. Makes me doubly determined to come back here later in the season and find bird's nest orchids at Bedford Purlieus, because I'm sure they're here. Yeah, I'll be back. Well, that's it for Bedford Purlieus. It is too early really for the two species that I came looking for, but it was too good a day to stay at home, so it's worth the trip. Good to see the fly orchids. 1 out of 2 is pretty good. I'm going to stick with that. Stay cheerful. We'll come back, probably come back and try and find those bird's nest orchids. They may just not be here this season, but we'll give it another try. Weather forecast tomorrow's pretty much more of the same. Blue sky and warm weather, so not 100% sure where I'm going to head tomorrow, but I'll pop out for a couple of hours in the morning and check out somewhere and see what's going on. So until then, I'll see you around again.